New York City is starting to reopen after more than 2 months in lockdown. But with many people still working from home, businesses are struggling under the so-called new normal.
Of course, I'm worried. As I told you before, main business we have is with offices and restaurants. And until those are going to be fully opened, I don't know if we can go back to normal numbers. I don't know how they're going to bring so many people into those huge office buildings.
The latest U.S. jobs report shows 1.5 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits last week. That brought the total to 44 million since lockdowns were put in place in March. More than half of those people have gotten their jobs back, but continuing claims still remain elevated at more than 20 million. The U.S. Federal Reserve says it will keep interest rates at zero until 2022 to prevent a deeper economic slump.
We are committed to using our full range of tools to support the economy and to help assure that the recovery from this difficult period will be as robust as possible.
But its chairman, Jerome Powell, says that alone will not be enough.
The extent of the downturn and the pace of recovery remain extraordinarily uncertain and will depend in large part on our success in containing the virus.
COVID-19 infections in the U.S. reached a world-topping 2 million this week. More than 100,000 Americans have died from the disease, and experts fear that number may double in the coming months as states ease social distancing restrictions. That means a recovery in New York and everywhere else could be nipped in the bud. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
Well, for more, let's go to Richard Wolff in New York. He's an economics professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Welcome back to Money Talks, Richard. Now, the number of people filing for unemployment is still stubbornly high, 1.5 million last week. Perhaps more concerning is the number of people who are remaining on unemployment benefits. That number is around 21 million. The jobs crisis is far from over, isn't it?
Yes, it's not only far from over, but the numbers are in dispute, particularly the most recent ones, because of special assumptions that had to be made. Just to give you one idea, asking people if they are unemployed turns out have led many of them to say, oh no, I'm only temporarily unemployed. And that's because these people want to believe, which is understandable, that the job they left will be there when they get back. But there is, as you well know, no guarantee of that. No government program requires it. And so there's this desperate desire, which is now beginning to question the very numbers that we use. Here's the bottom line. We are in the worst economic crash since the Great Depression of the 1930s, and we don't yet know whether we may not surpass that before this is over.
Yes, and it seems that US Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell has emphasized that point in his dire outlook on the US economy. He said that millions of people won't get their old jobs back and they may not get a job at all for some time to come. So what role then should the US Fed play in addressing this economic crisis?
Well, it is doing pretty much all that it can. It is pumping trillions of dollars of brand new money that they manufacture out of air into the economy. They have brought interest rates down literally to zero. That's what the Federal Reserve as the central bank can do. The amazing thing is what the rest of the government, the administration of the Republicans and Mr. Trump, it's amazing what they have not done. Let me underscore, in France and Germany, for example, there has been no explosion of unemployment. They kept the people working. The government helps pay their salaries. Nobody loses a job. No one has to worry that their job is taken away or not there when they get back. The United States government did nothing of the sort, plunging 20, 30 million people into unemployment, touching virtually every family. The ramifications of that in terms of reduced spending in the years to come, of desperate people looking for desperate solutions. That is going to shape American society for a long time, and it gets worse with each day that passes without the kind of coordinated government support that Americans need, but are almost alone in not getting.
And many of the economic projections that we're hearing right now is based on this idea that the infection rate will continue to slow. But in places like Texas, that state has reported 3 consecutive days of record-breaking COVID-19 hospitalizations. 9 Californian counties are reporting a spike in new coronavirus cases. How damaging would a second wave of infections be for the US economy?
Very, very severely, because look at it this way. And by the way, there are at least a dozen states, according to Johns Hopkins University, which keeps the best records in this country of the virus. We have a dozen states that have seen increases in corona deaths and corona infections since Labor Day, the 30th of May. So it's what you said, but even much larger. If another wave comes in September, as many epidemiologists predict, it will mean for many companies just barely holding on with the profits they've lost over the last 10 weeks will be going over that line. They will be closing permanently. And so many of the jobs people thought they got back, say in June or July, they will lose again in the fall, only then it won't be temporary, not even in their minds, it will be permanent. And given the cutbacks in spending from all these people who are unemployed, and all the people now afraid they will become unemployed, you're not going to see a pickup in the American economy until either years pass or we have a change of government that has a different attitude towards what its interventions ought to be.
We know US President Donald Trump was one of the loudest voices in calling for states to reopen their economies, despite health authorities warning that perhaps they weren't ready to do so. Do you think Donald Trump will be to blame if there is a second wave of infections?
Yes, he's already getting a disproportionate amount of blame, and I'm no supporter, but he gets a disproportionate amount of blame. The failure to prepare for this virus and to manage it, that begins before Mr. Trump. He is not alone responsible for these things. But yes, if we have another surge, he will be blamed. And look, he does deserve a good bit of it. He has for weeks been saying that workers ought to go back to work and that he's threatening them. And yet at the same time, he says nothing about the obligations of employers to provide for safe, healthy workplaces. That is an unfair, unequal treatment of the two partners in every factory, every office, and every store. And that is going to come back to haunt him because his tilting towards the employer class has never been more obvious to the people.
Okay, Richard Wolff from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, thank you again for sharing with us your analysis.